Hall is one of our 49 local historic landmarks. What that means is when a landmark is designated, it means it has special historic significance kind of above and beyond what you would consider for just an average building. The elevators are all original in their mechanical features, which is pretty unique. There's one other manually operated elevator in the city that I'm aware of at the Flatiron Building, so it's pretty unique that we have these here.
When we're going to take all three elevators and modernize them, but still keep as much historically accurate as we can.
A project like this is different than a construction project, and it's even more different than a regular modernization project. Typical modernization of an elevator, you just start ripping things out and putting new things in as best as possible. And I believe it was put in 1926, so it's way past its use date, and then the fact it's operated with an operator is way past ADA.
So this project was not based on the cost, which is kind of a new thing for most architectural projects. It was really based on the historic significance and trying to maintain all we could. Changes that were okay by the Historic Resources Commission that differed from the historic fabric had to do with really life safety items. The Historic Resources Commission oversees historic properties that are being renovated in town, which is a valuable thing because once they're gone, they're gone. In this project, we go through, well, really most projects, we have schematic design, design development, and then finally we get to construction documents. The Historic Resources Commission, or the HRC, reviews at key points within the design and to make sure it's preserving the fabric of the building.
So once a landmark is designated, it then falls under this category of what we call design review, where my department in the Historic Resources Commission are tasked with then reviewing any projects related to work inside and outside the building.
The goal was to try to make sure we keep as much things, to keep the look, to keep the atmosphere, if you will, of what this elevator represents. Because you don't find many elevators that still have operators on them, especially in a public building.
With the kind of general premise of historic preservation is retain and preserve any original or character defining features.
Every part of the project, down to the guys working in the field, to my coordinators, the salesmen, and our purchasing people, have to make sure they're working with people who understand the project. And luckily, we put together a group of people, not just within our own company, but throughout the industry, who got excited about it because it is a very different and a historical project. So elevators were still a little bit unusual in the 20s. They were coming out, but to come to Asheville, North Carolina, or anywhere that's off the eastern seaboard or out of Chicago, I won't say rare, but they were not as common as you might think. What you're looking at as far as history goes with these elevators were designed at the cusp of a technology change. AC versus DC, Tesla versus Edison. They're gearless elevators, which literally means what it is. The motor directly turns a gear as opposed to a geared where you've got a worm gear and that's turning a ring gear to make the elevator go up and down. These, you're just empowering the machine, which means we have those very large machines that you've seen up there. They're roped 2 to 1, so you've got a rope like a yo-yo coming down over a shiv underneath it. That's the most common thing there is. This same basic elevator system is what you found in the Chrysler Building in New York. It's what you found in the Empire State Building. Let me give you an example. In 1926, my belief is because those machines are so heavy, they were put up there before the roof was put on, which means they had to be hoisted up there. In that time period, you were probably still hoisting, even in the 20s, but especially in this part of the country, you were hoisting with mule team. People were brilliant in how they set up block and tackles to go up there with ropes and literally hoist these things up, put them in place, and then cover them up with tarps because they didn't have anything else until they had the time to build the roof on. So your elevator guys came in, built that, and then left until they were finished. These particular elevators, Otis still manufactured everything up in Connecticut, and they didn't have a lot of competition. At this time also, in the 1920s, you didn't have a lot of bigger buildings. There are a few buildings like this. You still had buildings that are 4 and 5 stories that didn't have elevators, or they had open platforms. At the time these elevators were installed, they were the top of technology. When you first push the button to move an elevator, it's got to say, okay, I'm going somewhere, so it's got to wake up. It's going to start applying power, so one of your contacts goes, start the generator. The motor's going to start. Another contact's going to say, okay, we're doing power. Generator's coming on, and then another contact's going to say, okay, I'm now transferring power or the ability for the elevator run And those are generally all those are going to be closed contacts to make it happen. They open when it doesn't need to happen. It's going to close to start the motor. Once the motor's running, it's going to open back up and be waiting for it to happen again. These elevators have relatively stayed exactly like they were since 1926. Until 1936, 8, 7, 8, 9, they added the switches you see in the car. And you look in the car, there's a panel in each cab that's got direction arrows, and then they've got numbers that used to light up. If you want to call the elevator to the 7th floor where we are, you got to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Your operators, if you had all 3 operators or both operators down there, both cars are making that noise. And so they first go, oh, is that a bing? Okay, I'm gonna go get this one. So they're gonna go chase that call. Your other operator's kind of watching the arrows in the hallway, trying to figure out when another call comes in where they're going. That worked, and that was what everybody was used to. What they did was they came up with this light panel that's added in the car, and so what that did was now you changed your hall buttons so they had up and down. You know, the first thing everybody notices when they come up the elevator is not the elevator itself, they see the position indicators. And the position indicators in this building are unusual because they are full circle dials. And most of the ones you're going to see are going to be half moon dials. And I'll be honest, looking at this full circle dial, I saw something I'd never seen. I've seen them run off tapes, I've seen them run off cables. These dials actually run off string.
There's a string that turns that dial as the elevator moves up and down. The string moves corresponding. So you'll see sometimes the string stretches, and instead of the dial being on the 2nd floor, it looks like it's 1.5 or 2.5.
With a project like this, the most important part is trying to keep the historical look to it. Which is a battle between what makes a safer equipment, what makes a more ADAAG accessible equipment, and just a better ride quality of equipment. What's going to move people better in the building? And we have to be very careful with every part of it, whether it's putting studs on the back of fixtures or just keeping up with bolts, because every one of them, these things are almost 100 years old. And we have to make sure they're going to be able to go back together the way we provided them.
So to get them up to today's standard, we have to have safety features we're going to incorporate, which are, you have to have a lighted button, which we don't have now when you press the button. The cars themselves are actually going to shrink depth-wise about 4 inches. When they take them out, they were made originally like we used to do things, and they're very ornate metal scroll work. So it's going to take someone who knows what they're doing to shrink them down 4 inches. You'll have, instead of the buzzer that you hit 7 times if you're on the 7th floor, you'll actually be able to use it without having an operator. We're going to do away with that, but we're going to keep everything as historically accurate. We're going to keep all the dials and keep all the buttons, but make them bigger. And we also are required to have a camera now. Today's code requires a camera in case someone's in the car and on the floor. We need to be able to see them. We're actually taking the old cars out one by one and going to take them out in pieces, bring them to the shop. They're then going to reconfigure them, put them back together, repaint them. So you have the old car reconfigured, new controls in an old style. Is we're going to replace all of the old contactors, which are outmoded. Everything now is electronic. We're putting in traction elevators, which means the old motors, the old generators, you just can't find people that rebuild them anymore, and the parts are harder to find. So we're doing away with all that. New motors, you won't have the DC anymore. It's all AC, all electronic, smaller, more compact, faster, more efficient.
I think entering a government building, by and large, can be a bit impersonal to a lot of people or intimidating, and I think the idea of coming in and finding several people sort of waiting for you as ambassadors, almost. They would have a smile on their face, greet you, ask you where you were heading or what you needed, and I think that would take people back. It would immediately change the energy.
The sad thing is you won't have that human operator pulling the lever anymore. You won't be able, you can talk to whoever's in there, but not the operator anymore. Without that interaction of the same person every day, you know, you get to know them, you have a conversation every time you come in, if you work in this building, and that human interaction. You know when their kids graduated, you know when they're going to college, you know who's having problems, and it's the human interaction, that part's going to be gone.
Physical presence of a person operating the elevator, I think, will be something that will be greatly missed. I feel like the experience of the elevators is very much tied to that experience, and that being kind of a lost craft, if you will. You know, getting on the elevator and chatting with whoever is operating them, it's a nice experience, and I think it will definitely be something that I will miss.
I would intentionally always come up the steps from the parking lot, which there's no few, and come through the front doors, because I just love the experience, even after 30-something years of coming through those front doors and meeting the elevator operators and just having that entire experience of feeling really special coming through that door and meeting some good people and coming to work.
A project like this, I won't say it's once in a lifetime, but it's rare. And I'm pushing the end of my career. And for me, this project's extra special. We're very proud to be here and really appreciate the faith that the City of Asheville has in us to do it.
I think we have gotten the project to a really good place, and I'm looking forward to seeing the finished product.
Because this project is for me, it's a once in a lifetime project that is going to be exciting to see when it's done. And this is that project that you will come back to when everything's completed, and you're going to want to take your family back, come look at what we did, because it's going to be amazing how old and new turn into one, and it's still historic, and it's still the craftsmanship and art of yesterday in today.